The room was charged with tension, thick with the weight of the scandal that had erupted in the darkest corners of politics. The Kansas Young Republicans, a once proud organization, had just been exposed. A leak of encrypted chats, once considered secure, now exposed the ugliness beneath their polished surfaces. In those messages were words that no one should ever utter, racist, violent, anti-Semitic ideas, laced with the venom of white supremacy. But it wasn't just the words. It was the power behind them, the leaders of the organization themselves, Gregory Matthews, the charismatic chairman, and William Carter, his trusted vice chairman. Their names, once synonymous with ambition and influence, were now tied to a movement that threatened the very fabric of what they claimed to stand for. The leak had been swift, devastating in its efficiency. Their hidden conversations, their whispered plans to an underground group, had been exposed. The walls they thought were so safe had been torn down, leaving only their shame in plain sight. What had been carefully guarded in encrypted chats had now spread like wildfire across the media, sparking outrage and disgust. Gregory Matthews sat in his office, the screens in front of him showing just how deep the breach had gone. His fingers hovered over his phone, a message alert flashing, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. What could he possibly say? How did it come to this? The chaos unfurled like a storm over Kansas, a state not often known for scandal of this magnitude. These weren't just abstract ideas floating in the ether. These were deliberate, hateful ideologies, crafted in the safety of encrypted spaces. They thought they were safe. But someone knew, someone was watching. Outside his office, the air was crisp with the chill of autumn. Leaves danced in the wind. But inside, Gregory's world was collapsing. The names of the Kansas Young Republicans echoed in his mind. All those who had trusted him, who had followed him. Would they all fall with him? His heart raced. He could hear his breath, shallow, as the weight of it all threatened to crush him. The Kansas Republican Party, their parent organization, had no choice but to act. Politico's report had shaken the political landscape to its core. The revelations were explosive, cutting through the political rhetoric like a blade. The public's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Calls for accountability echoed from every corner. There was no escaping it now. They had been dragged into the light, and there was no turning back. The parent party had always been careful, meticulous even, in its efforts to distance itself from extremism. But this was different. This wasn't some abstract fringe element. This was leadership, and the consequences were immediate. The decision had been made. The Kansas Young Republicans would be shut down. No second chances. No room for explanation. The call came through to disband the organization entirely. But what would happen to the people caught in the middle of it all? Would this be the end of their careers? Or would they somehow survive to fight another day? Gregory Matthews felt his pulse quicken. Could he still salvage something from the wreckage? William Carter, the vice chairman, stood in the corner of the room, staring out the window with clenched fists, his jaw tight. Neither man spoke for a long while, the silence louder than any words could be. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to the storm brewing inside the office. The fate of the Young Republicans had already been sealed. But for Matthews and Carter, this was only the beginning. And what of the Young Republicans themselves? Would they be punished for the sins of their leaders? Or would this fracture reveal a different truth, one buried beneath the surface? Could the damage be undone? Or would they be forever tainted by the actions of those who had once led them? The story was just beginning. And for Gregory Matthews and William Carter, the truth would soon come crashing down. Every decision from here on would be scrutinized, every move calculated. They couldn't escape their past. The ghosts of their words, their hateful, violent words, would follow them. As the Kansas Young Republicans were dismantled piece by piece, the question lingered in the air. Who would rise from the ashes of their failure? Would there be another figure take up the mantle, or would this be the end of an era? Would the next leader be any better, or would the cycle repeat itself? Only time would tell. But for now, they were trapped in the wake of their own destruction. Gregory Matthews' phone buzzed again, this time with a message from the Kansas Republican Party's chairperson. His hand shook as he swiped it open. The message brief but unmistakable. Shut it down. Now! The weight of those words hit him like a ton of bricks. suffocating him in a room that suddenly felt far too small. Are we really doing this? William Carter finally spoke, his voice low but filled with an edge of disbelief. He paced the room, his steps heavy. Is there no other way out? No loophole? But Gregory, sitting motionless, stared at the phone screen. This was it. There was no going back. The moment they had feared had arrived, and the consequences were irreversible. The Kansas Young Republicans, a group that had been part of the political landscape for years, was crumbling before their eyes. In the distance, the faint sound of a siren echoed through the streets. But to Gregory, it was the sound of a clock ticking down, his political career, and maybe his entire future, slipping through his fingers. How long would it take before the scandal destroyed everything? William stopped pacing, standing still, his breath heavy. What about the others? He asked, his voice breaking the tension. What happens to the people who aren't in the chat? The people who never knew about this? Gregory closed his eyes. What happens to the innocent? But there were no answers to give. The leak had made it clear. Their futures were intertwined with the actions of few. And once the floodgates were open, there was no stopping the rush of damage. No one was safe. Outside, the sun began to set, casting a cold, orange glow over the city. The last rays of daylight filtered through the office windows, but inside, the light felt suffocating. Gregory ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling inside. He had worked so hard to get to this point, to build something that could stand the test of time. But now, it felt like everything was crumbling, like a building collapsing under the weight of its own foundation. Gregory, we need a plan, William said urgently, his eyes searching for any sign of a way out. But Gregory shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. The fire that once burned bright in him had dimmed, replaced with a hollow emptiness. He knew this was more than a setback. It was a fall from grace, and there was no telling if he could ever recover. It's over. There's nothing left to fight for. Or was there? A part of him didn't want to give up. He had spent years climbing the ladder, maneuvering through the political chaos. What if there was still a chance? What if he could salvage something? Could he still fight to rebuild, or had he lost everything for good? The idea gnawed at him, an itch he couldn't scratch. He needed to know, was there a way back from this? Suddenly, his phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from a news outlet. He opened it. His heart sank as he read the headline. Kansas Young Republicans disbanded amid racist scandal. Leaders under fire. This was bigger than just a political loss. It was a personal destruction. Everything they had fought for was now tainted, shattered beyond repair. His name would forever be associated with the scandal. There would be no redemption, no clean slate. But what if there was more at play here? Who was behind the leak? And why now? Just as Gregory pondered this, the door to his office opened. It was Sarah, the communications director, her face pale. Her eyes were wide with alarm, the kind of expression that sent a chill through him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. Gregory stood up abruptly. "What's going on?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed him a folder, a thick stack of papers. Gregory opened it slowly, the weight of it too much to bear. The papers were marked in red. Confidential. "There's more," she whispered. "Someone's been digging deeper. And it's not over." The words hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. What more could there possibly be? Gregory's eyes scanned the papers quickly. He felt a chill crawl up his spine as he saw the names of people who had been involved, names he thought were safely out of reach. There were whispers in the shadows, individuals connected to the Kansas Young Republicans, people who had nothing to do with the scandal, but who were now being dragged into the mess by association. Gregory's mind raced. Who was behind this? Who had orchestrated the leak? And why were they digging deeper? His thoughts were interrupted by the phone on his desk, ringing loudly, its shrill tone cutting through the tense silence. Without thinking, he picked it up. It was a call from the Kansas Republican Party's headquarters. "Gregory," the voice on the other end said coldly, "you've got to come to the office now. This isn't just about you anymore. It's bigger, much bigger." He hung up without a word. What now? Gregory didn't waste a moment. He grabbed the folder from Sarah's hands, his fingers trembling as he closed it. "We need to get to the office," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. There was no time for hesitation now. Whatever had been uncovered, whatever storm was brewing, it was now or never. As they left the office, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The city felt strangely distant, the bustling streets outside seeming like a different world, one untouched by the chaos unfolding behind closed doors. Sarah walked beside him, her expression unreadable, but Gregory could feel the tension in the air between them. Her stiff posture and the tightness around her eyes told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. "Do you think this is the end?" she asked, her voice soft, as if she were afraid to say the words out loud. Gregory didn't respond immediately. What could he say? The organization he had built was falling apart, and with it, his entire career. The road ahead was unclear, and every step he took felt like it was leading him deeper into unknown territory. But he knew one thing for sure: the fight wasn't over yet. When they arrived at the Kansas Republican Party's headquarters, the atmosphere was charged with uncertainty. The hallways were quiet, the usual noise and hustle replaced by an eerie stillness. The kind of stillness that comes before something catastrophic. As they entered the conference room, the other members of the party were already there, gathered around a table. Their faces were grim, their eyes filled with the same tension that had followed Gregory all day. The chairperson, Linda Harper, sat at the head of the table. Her gaze was sharp, but her expression was unreadable. She had always been a woman of few words, but right now her silence was deafening. "Gregory," she began, her voice steady but heavy with authority, "we need answers. Now." He nodded, swallowing hard. He could feel the weight of the room's collective gaze on him, every eye trained on him, waiting for him to speak. What was he supposed to say? How could he explain this? How could he explain his involvement, his connection to the messages that had now become the scandal of the decade? "This has gone too far," Linda continued. "It's not just a few leaked messages. This is a full-on scandal. The public backlash is growing by the minute. What have you been doing behind closed doors? Who else is involved?" Gregory's heart pounded in his chest. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the past few days. Who had betrayed him? Who had leaked the information? It was all happening so fast. He opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off before he could say a word. "Do you realize the damage this is causing?" Sarah's voice cut through the silence, her words sharp and cutting. "This isn't just about you, Gregory. This is about all of us. Every single person in this room could be implicated if this keeps going." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Sarah was right, of course. The scandal was bigger than Gregory now. The damage had already been done, and there was no undoing it. The Kansas Young Republicans were no longer a political force. They were a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. They had become the embodiment of a system broken from within, and no matter how hard they tried to sweep it under the rug, the stain would remain. The phone on the table buzzed, breaking the tension. Linda glanced at the screen, her face turning pale as she read the message. "The media is already here," she said softly, almost to herself. "They want answers, and they want them now." Gregory felt a chill run down his spine. How long before the media turned on them completely? They had already been painted as villains, and soon they would become the story. There would be no escaping the public scrutiny. Sarah's eyes were wide with fear. "This is it," she whispered. "They've already turned on us." Just as the tension reached its peak, the door to the room opened. In walked a man Gregory hadn't seen in years. Peter Wells, a former political rival turned reluctant ally. His eyes were dark, his expression unreadable. He had been a shadow in the background of Kansas politics for years, a figure known for his ruthless methods and no-nonsense approach to power. Gregory knew better than to trust him, but right now, he was their only hope. "I hear you're in a bit of a mess," Peter said, his voice smooth but laced with a touch of amusement. "Don't worry, though. I've been keeping an eye on things. I have some connections that might just help you out." Gregory stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "What are you talking about?" Peter's lips curled into a faint smirk. "I know who leaked the information, and I know why. But the question is, are you willing to do what it takes to stop them? The room went still, every eye fixed on Peter, waiting for him to reveal more. But the question he posed was more than just a political maneuver. It was a line in the sand, and Gregory had to decide which side of it he would stand on. He swallowed hard, his mind whirling. What did Peter know that they didn't? Who had orchestrated the leak? Who stood to gain from all of this? Peter's gaze lingered on Gregory for a moment before he added, "You're out of options, Gregory, but I can help you. All you have to do is ask." Gregory looked around the room, his thoughts racing. The stakes were higher than ever. But at what cost? What would he have to sacrifice to keep his political career alive? What was Peter asking of him? The room fell silent once again, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. Gregory knew the decision before him would change everything. But could he live with the consequences? Gregory didn't answer immediately. The silence hung thick in the air, every second feeling like an eternity. Peter's words echoed in his mind. "You're out of options, Gregory, but I can help you. All you have to do is ask." The power, the influence in Peter's tone was undeniable. Gregory could feel it, like a rope pulling him in, but he resisted. "At what cost? What exactly are you offering?" Gregory finally asked, his voice tight with suspicion. He was used to making deals, but this felt different. There was a danger in Peter's offer, a price that might be too high for anyone to pay. Peter chuckled softly, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and something darker. "I'm offering you a way out, Gregory, a way to fix all of this. But you'll have to trust me. Trust me enough to go the distance, no matter how far it takes us." He paused, letting the words settle in. "And you'll need to make some sacrifices." Gregory could feel the weight of his gaze. The room was heavy with the unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about saving face. This was about survival. He didn't know whether it was his pride or desperation that kept him from agreeing outright. But something inside him screamed that Peter's help came with strings attached. Was it worth it? Sarah was the first to speak up. "Gregory, we can't trust him. Peter's not the kind of person you make deals with. He's dangerous." Her voice was filled with urgency, but Gregory could see the fear behind her words. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what Peter might demand in exchange for his so-called help. Gregory turned to her, his mind clouded with the weight of everything. How long had it been since they had been in this position? How long had they fought for something better, for a clean path, for respect? Now, it felt like they were on the verge of losing it all. Everything they had fought for, everything they had worked toward. Was there a chance for redemption, or was Peter right? Had they exhausted all other options? His thoughts were interrupted when the door opened once more, and another figure stepped into the room. It was Michael Roth, the Kansas state senator and a longtime ally. His presence commanded attention as he walked with purpose toward the table, his eyes scanning the room before locking on Gregory. "Gregory," Michael said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable urgency. "What's going on here? The party's on the brink. We need to make a decision. Do we stand with you, or do we cut our losses?" Gregory felt the weight of those words. Cut their losses. It was exactly what they had feared. The party turning its back on them. All the work they had put into building alliances, all the promises they had made to the people, it could all come crashing down if they didn't act quickly. Peter looked at Michael, a glint of calculation in his eyes. "I'm offering Gregory a way out." Peter said smoothly, "The only way forward is through tough decisions. If you're not willing to make those choices, then the party might as well dissolve itself right here, right now." Michael's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Gregory, his gaze searching. "What are you going to do, Gregory?" he asked softly, almost as if he were pleading with him to choose wisely. The room held its breath. Gregory stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment, the tipping point. Every choice, every word from here on out would determine the rest of his life, and the lives of everyone in that room. Could he walk away from Peter's offer? Could he make things right without going down a dark path? Or was Peter right? Was this the only option left? A sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A young staffer stepped in, holding a tablet. He looked from face to face before turning to Gregory. "The media is here," the staffer said, his voice tight. They're waiting for a statement. They're ready to tear everything apart. Gregory's pulse quickened. This was it. The moment he had been dreading. The moment that would decide everything. The eyes of the media, the public, and the party were all on him. He couldn't escape it now. His decision had to be made fast. Michael stepped forward, his hand resting on the back of Gregory's chair. You've got two choices, Gregory. You can take Peter's deal, clean up the mess, and save whatever's left of your career. Or you can walk away and let it all burn down. Gregory's eyes flicked from Michael to Peter, to Sarah. What was the right choice? He could feel the weight of the decision crushing him, each option seeming darker than the last. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing. Time was running out. With one last glance at Peter, Gregory exhaled slowly. I'll do what needs to be done, but I'm not making any deals yet. I need to see what's really going on. Peter's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. I'm not the one you'll have to answer to, he said. But remember, every choice has consequences. The room fell into a tense silence. The clock was ticking. The media was waiting, and Gregory had no more time to delay. What was he willing to risk? What was the true price of survival? The clock was ticking. Gregory could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, each second feeling like an eternity. The media, the public, they were all waiting for him to make his move. Was he willing to sacrifice everything just to stay in power? Could he live with the consequences of Peter Wells' deal? How much time do we have? Gregory asked, his voice hoarse as he turned to Michael. Not much, Michael replied, his expression grim. The media's already sniffing around. We need a statement, a firm position. They'll tear us apart if we don't have answers. Gregory's gaze drifted to the window, where the last rays of sunlight were slipping away, casting a blood-red hue over the city. The calm of the evening was a stark contrast to the storm swirling in his mind. It felt like everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. The Kansas Young Republicans had been his life, his legacy, and now it was all crumbling. How did we get here? Gregory muttered, his eyes narrowing as he replayed the events in his mind. It had all seemed so simple at first. A group of young, ambitious leaders wanted to make a difference. But now, the corruption had seeped in like poison in the veins of the organization. It wasn't just a leak anymore. It was everything that had led up to it. The lies, the manipulation, the power struggles. The door creaked open and Sarah stepped in, her face pale and drawn. Gregory, we need to talk, she said, her voice tight with urgency. He looked at her, his heart sinking. What is it? She walked over to the table and dropped the file in front of him. It's about the leak. We found something. Someone's been working behind the scenes, pulling strings, and it's not just a coincidence that this came out now. Gregory's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? He asked, his voice low with fear. Who's behind this? Sarah didn't answer immediately. She opened the file and slid it toward him. Gregory leaned in, his fingers trembling as he scanned the papers. The names, the dates. It was all there, but one name stood out above the rest. Peter Wells. No, Gregory whispered. This can't be right. Sarah met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and fear. Peter's been working with someone on the inside. He's been orchestrating the entire thing. The leak, the media frenzy, it's all part of a bigger plan. Gregory's mind raced. Why? Why would Peter do this? Was he just trying to take over? Or was there something more sinister at play? He had always known Peter to be ruthless, but this felt different. This was a betrayal on a scale that Gregory couldn't even comprehend. How do we stop him? Gregory asked, his voice cold as ice. We need to act fast. If this gets out, we're done for. Sarah shook her head. We can't stop him alone, but we can try to fight back, expose him for what he is. Gregory clenched his fists. I'm not going down without a fight, he muttered. We need to play this smart. Michael stepped forward, his face hardening. If you want to fight back, we need to make a move. And we need to do it now. Gregory took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. The final stand. He looked at Sarah, then Michael, and finally Peter. There was no turning back now. He had to make a choice, a decision that would determine not just his future, but the future of everyone in this room. "All right," Gregory said, his voice firm. "We do this together. We expose Peter and we take him down, but we do it on our terms." Peter's smirk flashed in his mind. Would he be prepared for what was coming next? The tension in the room was palpable as Gregory looked at each person, the weight of their lives resting on his shoulders. If they failed, everything would be lost. If they succeeded, they could survive, but only if they were careful. Every step from here on out had to be calculated, precise. They couldn't afford another mistake. As the minutes ticked by, Gregory felt the room closing in around him. The stakes had never been higher. The only thing left to do was act, and act fast. But would their plan succeed, or would Peter be one step ahead of them? The plan was simple, at least in theory. They would leak the information about Peter's involvement, expose him for what he truly was. But the reality was far more complicated. There were layers to the conspiracy that Gregory hadn't yet uncovered. And as they moved forward, the danger grew with every step. Gregory paced the conference room, his mind racing through every possible scenario. What if Peter had anticipated this move? What if he had already covered his tracks? Gregory's fingers drummed against the table as he stared at the map of connections they'd drawn up. There were too many moving pieces, too many unanswered questions. Michael leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We need to be careful. If we do this wrong, we'll all go down with him. Are we ready for that?" His words were a sharp reminder of the stakes. One wrong move, and they'd be buried under the weight of the scandal. But Gregory didn't have time to second guess. They had no choice. Peter had already made his move. Now it was their turn. "What's the first step?" Gregory asked, his voice low and focused. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of everyone's expectations bearing down on him. "First, we take control of the narrative," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension. "We get ahead of the media. We release the information strategically. Not all at once, but just enough to spark doubt. If we can cast doubt on Peter's intentions, we might still have a chance." "Not just doubt," Gregory added, his mind working quickly. "We need to make it clear that Peter's been playing both sides. We need to show the world that he's been manipulating everything from the start." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained uneasy. "It's risky, Gregory. One wrong move, and it's all over. If Peter has more people on the inside than we know, we might be walking straight into a trap." "I don't care," Gregory said, his jaw set with determination. "We do it now or we do nothing. If we wait, we lose. We have to act first." As they continued strategizing, the door to the room opened again. It was Linda Harper, the Kansas Republican Party chairperson, her face drawn and tired. "Gregory, I've just spoken with the press," she said, her voice clipped. "They're demanding answers. If we don't give them something, they'll twist this into an even bigger mess. You have to decide now, what's the story you want to tell?" Gregory took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room. This was it, the moment of truth. If they didn't move quickly, the media would turn their failure into an uncontrollable wildfire. They needed to stay one step ahead. "We control the story," Gregory said, his voice unwavering. "We give them enough to question Peter's motives, but not enough to expose everything. Keep them focused on the bigger picture. Let them believe there's more going on than they realize. We don't show them everything. We only show them what we need them to see." Linda nodded, her eyes narrowing in thought. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." She turned to the rest of the room. "I'll make the call to the press. We'll need a statement ready, and it needs to be tight. No room for error." As the group prepared to move forward, the tension in the room seemed to rise with every passing second. They were no longer playing defense. Now they were on the offensive. They were taking control of the narrative, but it wasn't going to be easy. The consequences of failure were looming over them all. Just as they were about to leave the room, Gregory's phone buzzed once again. He looked down at the screen, his heart stopping in his chest. It was a message from an anonymous number. You're playing into his hands. Step back before it's too late. His fingers froze over the phone. Who was this? Was it someone inside the party? Someone who had been watching them? Or was it another player in the game? Someone working with Peter? The message was cryptic, but the warning was clear. They were being watched. "Who is it?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with mixture of curiosity and concern. Gregory didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure what to make of the message, but one thing was certain. They were up against something far bigger than they had anticipated. Peter's web was deeper than they thought, and they weren't just fighting him. They were fighting everyone who had a stake in this game. "Let's move," Gregory said finally, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "We don't have time to waste. Get the statement ready. We're going public." As they moved quickly prepare, the stakes seemed to grow higher with every second. The trap was set. The media was waiting. And Peter Wells? He was nowhere to be found, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. The final act was about to begin. But what was Peter's next move? And who was behind the warning? The press conference was set. The cameras were ready. Gregory stood backstage, his heart racing in his chest. The moment of truth had arrived. They had carefully constructed their narrative, a story designed to turn the tide in their favor. But Gregory knew the danger was far from over. Peter Wells was still out there, pulling strings in the shadows. And now, it seemed there was someone else in the game, someone who was warning them. The weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on him. This wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about the future of everything he had worked for. The Kansas Young Republicans were now the face of scandal, and the nation was watching. If Gregory faltered, if the story fell apart, the damage would be irreversible. How much more could they endure? The question that lingered in Gregory's mind was simple. Who could be trusted? The web they had woven was becoming more complex with every move they made. Was the warning real, or was it just another tactic to throw them off balance? Was Peter really the mastermind, or was there a larger force at play, orchestrating this entire disaster from the shadows? "Gregory," Sarah whispered urgently, "what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Gregory didn't answer immediately. His breath was shallow, his mind clouded with doubt. This wasn't just about defending the Kansas Young Republicans anymore. It was about saving himself and possibly those closest to him. He could feel the pressure building, suffocating him. Every step forward felt like it was leading him into deeper water. He glanced at the clock on the wall. Time was slipping away. He had to make his move, or he would lose everything. But what if everything he'd fought for was just an illusion? What if Peter's plan was already set in motion, and they were too late to stop it? The conference hall was ready, the bright lights blinding as they prepared to cast Gregory and his team in front of the public eye. Every word, every gesture would be scrutinized. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The weight of the eyes of the press, the public, and his peers pressed down on him. The room felt small, the walls closing in as he realized the full magnitude of what was about to unfold. What was the true price of exposing the truth? And what would be the final cost of their fight? Gregory's grip tightened on the podium. He felt the cold sweat on his brow, his palms slick with the anticipation of what was coming. Would this moment define him, or would it destroy him? Would the audience see him as a hero fighting for justice, or as a villain caught in the web of his own lies? Every choice he made from this point forward would shape not only his legacy, but the very future of the Kansas Young Republicans. The media was waiting, their cameras poised to capture every second. He couldn't afford to falter now. The storm was already here. The moment the doors opened, Gregory stepped out into the spotlight, his heart pounding in his chest. The sea of reporters and flashing cameras greeted him, but he felt oddly detached. The noise was deafening, but the chaos was drowned out by the sound of his own thoughts. "Good evening," Gregory began, his voice steady but laced with tension. He couldn't afford to falter now. "We are here today to address the scandal that has rocked our organization to its core. We acknowledge the harm that has been caused, and we take full responsibility for the actions of a few. But make no mistake, we are not defined by this moment. We are defined by how we respond." His eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of several reporters. He could feel their scrutiny, their judgment. They were waiting for him to slip up, waiting for him to say the wrong thing. What did they want to hear? Could they be swayed? Or was he already too far gone? We've learned a lot in the past few days, Gregory continued, trying to maintain his composure. We've learned that we need to do better, and we are committed to making things right. But we also know that this issue is not just about us. It's about the future of this organization and the future of the political landscape in Kansas. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. What was the future of the Kansas Young Republicans? Was there a future, or was it already decided? Hanging in the balance of the public's judgment? The reporters leaned forward, their pens poised to capture every word. Gregory knew the stakes had never been higher. We have made mistakes, and we are going to fix them, he said, his voice firm. But there are others, people who have been working behind the scenes, trying to use the situation for their own gain. We are not the only ones who have the answer for this. Who are these people, Mr. Matthews? A reporter asked sharply, cutting through the tension. Gregory hesitated. How much should he reveal? He knew the truth would be dangerous, not just for Peter, but for everyone involved. But it was too late to hold back. Yes, Gregory said slowly, looking around the room. There are those in positions of power who have used this organization for their own agendas. They are the ones who have created this chaos, and we will find out who they are. The silence was deafening as his words sank in. The media buzzed, their curiosity piqued. But Gregory's heart sank with the weight of what was to come. What if Peter had already anticipated this move? What if they were already too late? Just as the tension reached its peak, Gregory's phone buzzed once more. He glanced at the screen. Another anonymous message. We're not done yet. You're playing into a much larger game. Stop before it's too late. His fingers froze. Who was this? The camera flashes intensified, the noise escalating. The moment of truth had arrived. This fight is far from over, and the stakes have never been higher. What's going to happen next? Drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you've enjoyed today's story, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next heart-pounding tale from Black Justice Tales. Here's a question for you. Would you have taken Gregory's path, or would you have walked away from the deal? Think about it. When everything is on the line, how far would you go to ensure justice is served? Share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments. And stay tuned for the next episode. The story continues